When Clint Eastwood first heard his name mocked on one of the most watched liberal talk shows in the country, he didn't say a word. The legendary actor and director, known for his quiet strength and unshakable demeanor, simply watched as the host turned him into the punchline of a monologue meant to provoke laughs and controversy. What the host didn't know was that Clint wasn't the type to lash out or fire back with insults. Instead, he let his actions speak louder than words. In true Clint Eastwood style, what happened next wasn't just a legal battle, it became a defining moment that forced Hollywood, the media, and the nation to confront the fine line between humor and respect. And as always, Clint delivered a lesson no one saw coming. It was a night like any other on The Alex Mason Show. The lights dimmed, and the signature theme blared through the studio as Alex Mason, known for his sharp wit and unapologetically liberal stance, strutted onto the stage. Under the glaring spotlights, his smug grin radiated confidence. Tonight's monologue promised to be no different, a heady mix of biting humor and pointed political commentary. But as the segment unfolded, the audience began to sense a sharper edge to his remarks. Alex wasn't just delivering jokes, he was pushing boundaries. And at the center of his routine was a name he had no idea would come back to haunt him: Clint Eastwood. "And let's talk about Clint Eastwood," Alex began, pacing the stage theatrically. "The man's been playing the same grizzled cowboy since the dawn of time. I mean, is he even acting anymore? Or just rolling out of bed and muttering, 'Get off my lawn' for the cameras?" Laughter erupted from parts of the crowd, while others exchanged hesitant glances. But Alex wasn't done. "And don't get me started on his political leanings. Imagine being so out of touch that you make the chair in your infamous speech seem progressive." The audience roared, but the jabs kept coming, delving into Clint's age, career, and values. "At some point, Clint, even the horses get tired of riding into the sunset." The segment quickly went viral, social media platforms exploding with divided opinions. Clint Eastwood trended within hours. Fans of Clint were outraged, accusing Alex of disrespecting a Hollywood legend who had paved the way for countless others. Critics of Clint, however, defended the monologue as satire. As the uproar grew, Clint Eastwood himself remained characteristically silent, his stoic presence seemingly untouched by the noise. But behind closed doors, his legal team wasn't so quiet. They meticulously reviewed the footage, assessing whether Alex Mason's remarks had crossed the line from humor into defamation. Though the public was unaware, Clint's silence wasn't indifference, it was deliberation, and it was only a matter of time before he made his move. Clint Eastwood sat on the patio of his Carmel home, gazing out at the Pacific Ocean as the waves crashed against the rugged coastline. A half-finished cup of coffee rested on the table beside him, untouched for over an hour. The viral clip from The Alex Mason Show played in his mind like a broken record, each jab hitting harder than the last. It wasn't the insults themselves that lingered, it was the principle of it all. For decades, Clint had lived by a code: stay above the fray. The Hollywood legend rarely addressed controversy, preferring to let his work speak for itself. But this was different. This wasn't just an attack on him, it was an attack on what he stood for, a legacy built on grit, perseverance, and respect. The faint crunch of gravel signaled the arrival of his daughter, Allison. She joined him on the patio, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Dad, you don't have to do this," she said softly. "People know who you are. You don't need to prove anything." Clint turned to her, his steely gaze softened by the years, but still piercing. "It's not about proving anything," he replied, his voice low and measured. "It's about showing people that respect matters, that words have weight." Over the next few days, Clint sought counsel from his closest friends and family. Some urged him to let it go, to rise above the noise. Others, including a longtime lawyer and confidant, encouraged him to take a stand, not for himself, but for the principle. Late one evening, after hours of reflection, Clint made his decision. He picked up the phone, dialing his attorney. "Let's move forward," he said simply. "This isn't just about me, it's about accountability." By the next morning, the lawsuit had been filed, sending shockwaves through Hollywood and beyond. The man who had spent his life embodying silent strength had spoken, and the world would soon listen. The news broke on a crisp Monday morning, sending shockwaves through the entertainment industry. Clint Eastwood, the legendary actor and director, had filed a defamation lawsuit against Alex Mason and the network behind his show. The lawsuit accused the host of crossing the line from satire into malicious intent, alleging that the remarks in the viral monologue had caused undue harm to Clint's reputation. Headlines blared across every major outlet. Clint Eastwood takes on Alex Mason in legal showdown. Cable news networks interrupted their usual programming to analyze the case, while online platforms buzzed with theories and opinions. "This is unprecedented," one pundit remarked during a heated panel discussion. "We're talking about a Hollywood icon standing up to one of the most outspoken figures in modern media. It's going to get messy." The host himself wasted no time addressing the lawsuit on air. Alex Mason opened his next episode with a smirk plastered across his face. "Well, folks," he began, his voice dripping with sarcasm, "it looks like I've upset Dirty Harry himself. Clint Eastwood is suing me. Who knew the toughest cowboy in Hollywood had such thin skin?" Laughter erupted from the studio audience, but behind the scenes, the network was in full damage control mode. Executives held emergency meetings debating whether to stand by their host or issue an apology. The PR team scrambled to craft statements while legal advisors pored over Clint's claims, assessing the potential fallout. The pressure mounted as sponsors began to call, concerned about being associated with a lawsuit of this magnitude. Meanwhile, Clint remained silent, letting the lawsuit speak for itself. His legal team, composed of seasoned professionals, prepared for what was shaping up to be a landmark case. The man who had spent a lifetime as the calm, unshakable force in front of the camera was now poised to bring that same resolve to the courtroom. As word of Clint Eastwood's lawsuit spread, public opinion ignited like dry brush in the California sun. Social media turned into a battleground, with hashtags like #TeamClint and #Free Speech Debate trending worldwide. Everyone from die-hard fans of Clint's films to outspoken defenders of Alex Mason weighed in on the controversy. "Clint Eastwood is a legend," one user tweeted. "He's standing up for dignity in an age where respect is dying. What Team Clint?" Others saw it differently. "Come on, it's a joke. If we can't laugh at public figures, where does it end?" "Free speech debate," another user fired back. The debates were heated, with memes, think pieces, and TikToks dissecting every angle of the case. The divide extended beyond social media. Hollywood itself seemed split. On one side, longtime collaborators and admirers of Clint, including high-profile actors and directors, voiced their support. "Clint has always stood for integrity," a former co-star said in a television interview. "I think it's brave of him to take a stand, especially in today's climate." On the other side, comedians and talk show hosts rallied around Alex, framing the lawsuit as an attack on creative freedom. "We can't start suing every time someone gets their feelings hurt," one late-night host quipped during his monologue. "Otherwise, none of us would have jobs." The stakes felt larger than just Clint versus Alex. Commentators debated whether the case would set a new precedent for what could and couldn't be said about public figures. Meanwhile, fans of Clint shared clips of his iconic movie moments, using them as rallying cries. "This isn't about politics," one viral post read. "It's about respect for a man who's earned it." Through it all, Clint remained as he always had, silent, focused, and resolute. His decision to file the lawsuit had sparked a national conversation about boundaries, respect, and the ever-blurring line between humor and harm. But as the noise grew louder, one thing became clear. This was no ordinary legal battle. It was a cultural moment, and the world was watching. The courtroom was packed, with every seat filled and cameras stationed outside capturing the moment. Clint Eastwood, a name synonymous with resilience and grit, sat quietly at the plaintiff's table, flanked by his legal team. On the opposite side, Alex Mason and the network's lawyers appeared confident, their expressions unreadable as the trial commenced. Clint's lead attorney, a seasoned litigator named Julia Hart, opened with precision. "This case isn't about stifling free speech," she began, her voice firm but measured. "It's about the line between humor and harm. When a platform as influential as Mr. Mason's uses that power to maliciously target someone, it goes beyond comedy. It becomes defamation." The team presented a montage of Alex's monologue, focusing on moments where the remarks strayed from opinion into outright personal attacks. The courtroom listened intently as the comments about Clint's age, career, and values played back on a large screen. Julia followed with testimonials from experts in media ethics, emphasizing how such remarks could damage Clint's reputation, particularly given his storied legacy. The defense, however, came prepared. The network's attorney, Marcus Green, took the floor, arguing that Alex's comments were comedic in nature and protected under the First Amendment. "Mr. Mason's show has always been satirical," Marcus declared. "To single out this segment is to misunderstand the role of humor in public discourse." But the turning point came when Clint himself took the stand. The room fell silent as he stood, his towering presence undiminished by age. His voice was calm, deliberate, yet commanding. "Words have power," he said, looking directly at the jury. "They can inspire, they can unite, but they can also wound. I've spent my life telling stories that resonate with people, and I believe in free speech. But I also believe in accountability. When you cross the line from expression to malice, you're no longer joking, you're harming." The tension in the room was palpable. Clint's words carried the weight of experience, leaving the jury and spectators hanging on every syllable. It was clear that this wasn't just a legal battle, it was a fight for principles. As the trial unfolded, Alex Mason returned to his show, using the platform to defend himself and his comedic style. "You know, folks," he began, his trademark smirk plastered across his face, "apparently, making jokes about Clint Eastwood is now a crime. What's next? Suing people for laughing too hard at Gran Torino?" The studio audience erupted in laughter, but Alex's tone quickly sharpened. "This lawsuit isn't about defamation, it's about silencing critics. Clint Eastwood is a Hollywood icon, sure, but that doesn't make him immune to humor. This is an attack on free speech, plain and simple." Behind the scenes, Alex's team doubled down. They launched a PR campaign framing Clint as out of touch with modern comedy and the changing landscape of public discourse. Interviews with comedians and commentators painted the lawsuit as an overreach, claiming it set a dangerous precedent for censorship in entertainment. But while Alex rallied his supporters, Clint's team was quietly building a case that would dismantle the defense's narrative. In a breakthrough moment, Julia Hart presented evidence to the court, behind-the-scenes emails and footage from the show's production staff. The documents revealed that Alex's remarks had been carefully scripted with the explicit intent of provoking outrage. One email from a producer read, "This will stir the pot, guaranteed clicks and controversy." The revelation was damning. What Alex had framed as off-the-cuff humor was exposed as a calculated move to generate ratings, regardless of the personal impact. The courtroom buzzed with whispers as the evidence was displayed, and Alex's smug exterior faltered. Clint's team capitalized on the moment. "This isn't about comedy or free speech," Julia argued. It's about exploitation, using someone's name and reputation as fodder for cheap attention, with no regard for the consequences. As the defense scrambled to recover, Alex's confidence visibly wavered. The narrative he had carefully crafted was beginning to unravel, leaving the audience and the jury wondering just how far the host was willing to go to save himself. The tension in the courtroom was electric. Both sides had presented compelling arguments, and it seemed like the case could go either way. But just as the defense began to regroup, Clint's lead attorney, Julia Hart, approached the bench with a quiet confidence. "Your Honor," she announced, her voice cutting through the murmurs, "the plaintiff would like to call a surprise witness." The courtroom buzzed with curiosity as a figure rose from the back of the room. It was a young woman, dressed professionally, but with an air of hesitance. She made her way to the stand, avoiding eye contact with Alex Mason, whose confident smirk had all but vanished. Her name was Emily Carter, a former producer for The Alex Mason Show. "Ms. Carter," Julia began, "can you tell the court about your time working on the show?" Emily took a deep breath, her voice trembling slightly as she spoke. "I worked for the show for 3 years," she began, "and during that time, it became clear that ratings were prioritized over everything, ethics included." She glanced toward Alex, her expression firm. "The environment was toxic. We were constantly pushed to create controversy, no matter the cost." The room fell silent as Emily continued, describing how staff were often pressured to find ways to provoke public outrage. "It wasn't about comedy or creative freedom," she said. "It was about stirring the pot." Alex knew that mocking someone like Clint Eastwood, a legend, would generate backlash, but he didn't care. To him, controversy equaled attention. Julia pressed further, asking about the specific segment in question. Emily revealed damning details, meetings where Alex and the producers explicitly discussed how far they could push the jokes without crossing legal boundaries. "It wasn't accidental," she said. "It was premeditated." The courtroom erupted in whispers, the tide visibly shifting. Emily's testimony painted a picture of a host willing to exploit anyone for ratings, and it cast Clint's lawsuit in a new light. This wasn't about silencing comedy. It was about holding someone accountable for calculated cruelty. After weeks of arguments, evidence, and testimony, the courtroom was packed to capacity as the jury filed back in. The judge, a stern but fair woman, called the court to order. Clint Eastwood sat calmly, his expression unreadable, while Alex Mason fidgeted nervously at the defense table. The verdict was delivered. The jury ruled in favor of Clint Eastwood. The courtroom erupted into murmurs as the judge outlined the consequences. The show and Alex Mason were ordered to issue a public apology and pay a substantial settlement for defamation. But just as the courtroom began to settle, Clint stood and addressed the judge. "Your Honor," he said, his voice steady, "I respectfully decline the monetary damages. This was never about money for me. It was about standing up for something bigger, for respect, for accountability." The room fell silent as the weight of Clint's words sank in. Even Alex seemed momentarily stunned, his usual bravado replaced with a flicker of something resembling shame. The judge nodded, her expression softening. "Mr. Eastwood, your decision speaks volumes about your character. Let this case serve as a reminder. Free speech is a cornerstone of our society, but with that freedom comes responsibility. Words can be powerful, and those who wield them must do so with care." Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed for interviews, but Clint kept his response brief. "I've said what I needed to say. This was about principles, not publicity." Later that evening, Alex Mason took to the airwaves for his mandatory apology. Gone was the smirk, replaced by a more subdued and measured tone. "I want to take this opportunity to apologize to Mr. Eastwood," he said. "My comments were inappropriate and crossed a line. I've learned a lot from this experience." While some viewed the apology as insincere, the impact of the case was undeniable. Clint's decision to decline monetary compensation and focus on the principles behind the lawsuit resonated deeply with the public. The verdict became a turning point, sparking national conversations about accountability, respect, and the true cost of words. For Clint, the battle wasn't about winning, it was about making a statement. And with the courtroom now behind him, his legacy as both an artist and a man of integrity was only further solidified. The evening broadcast of The Alex Mason Show opened with a noticeably subdued atmosphere. The usual fanfare of laughter and applause was replaced with a muted hum as Alex Mason took his seat under the glaring studio lights. His trademark smirk was gone, replaced by a strained expression that betrayed his discomfort. "As many of you know," Alex began, his voice tighter than usual, "recent events have brought me under scrutiny. I want to address the remarks I made about Clint Eastwood during a past segment." He paused, glancing off camera for a brief moment before continuing. "My comments were inappropriate, and they crossed a line. For that, I apologize to Mr. Eastwood and anyone else who felt offended." The apology, though reluctant and clearly rehearsed, was enough to meet the terms of the court's ruling, but the audience's reaction was tepid, with some viewers expressing doubt about Alex's sincerity. Behind the scenes, the fallout was far from over. The network, reeling from the negative press and financial repercussions of the lawsuit, announced sweeping changes to its programming. In a formal statement, the network vowed to implement stricter guidelines for content and place greater emphasis on respect and accountability in their shows. "We recognize the need for responsible use of our platforms," the statement read, "and we are committed to fostering constructive dialogue moving forward." Meanwhile, Clint Eastwood's reputation soared in the public eye. Fans and critics alike lauded his decision to prioritize principles over profit, with many viewing him as a beacon of dignity in an increasingly chaotic cultural landscape. Social media buzzed with admiration, and hashtags like "Watch Clint," "The Legend," and "Respect Matters" trended for days. Through it all, Clint remained characteristically reserved, quietly continuing his life while the world debated the legacy of the case. For him, the battle wasn't about changing others, it was about staying true to himself. A week after the verdict, Clint Eastwood stood before a podium in a modest press room, flanked by reporters eager for his words. He had avoided the limelight throughout the trial, but now, as the dust began to settle, he felt it was time to address the larger implications of the case. "I'm not here to celebrate a win," Clint began, his voice steady but firm. "This was never about winning or losing. It was about reminding ourselves of the power of words and the responsibility that comes with having a platform." The room fell silent, every journalist hanging on his words. "We live in a time where it's easier than ever to tear each other down," Clint continued, his gaze sweeping across the crowd. "But we forget that words can do more than harm. They can heal, they can unite, and they can build something better. It's up to us to choose how we use them." He paused, allowing the weight of his message to sink in. "I've spent my life telling stories, and if there's one thing I've learned, it's that respect is not a weakness. Civility is not outdated. They're the foundations of any meaningful connection." After the press conference, Clint quietly left the room, declining further interviews. Later that evening, he was seen walking along the shore near his home in Carmel. The sun dipped low over the Pacific, casting golden hues across the water. Dressed simply, with his hands tucked into his pockets, Clint looked out at the horizon, the sound of waves crashing softly in the distance. For him, the fight wasn't about revenge or retribution. It was about standing firm in his values, even when the world seemed intent on pulling him into the chaos. As he walked along the beach, his silhouette blending into the fading light, one thing was clear. Clint Eastwood would always remain true to himself, no matter the noise around him. And in that quiet reflection, the world found its most powerful message yet, a reminder that dignity, integrity, and respect still have a place in the modern age. Want to hear more of this? Then click on the video on the right-hand side, which is even crazier.